Hello everyone and welcome back to this week's episode of Military Mutterings, where today we're going to talk about the Ise-class battleships. Now, as you can probably tell, I'm doing the intro, me, Kevin Jansen, because Jack is not here sadly. He could not join us this week, which is why I brought along another friend today. You may introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Sosig, and I'm a good pal of Kevin.
Well, good pal of me and Jack, to be honest.
Yes,
But yeah, you know a thing or two about ships, just like me, which is why I introduced you to this.
yes, I actually do like these ships because they're actually quite interesting.
Yeah, so Ise-class battleships, the better Fuso. Where should we start with these? I guess originally these were dreadnought battleships, if I'm not correct. Well, pretty much everything back in the day was called dreadnought battleship.
Yeah, they were mainly built. They were designed during the 1910s, when the Japanese were thinking of the 88 of like they had their battle cruisers and the battleships. So they wanted the Congos, and then they wanted the Fusos as the main battering hammer for their fleet. So they decided to go ahead and building the Congos but they only could afford one Fuso. So
Oh, so like if I remember correctly, it was the Congos were serving as the fast battleships. They only were armed with eight 356mm guns, but then the Fusos were going to serve as the primary big battleships, where speed was not much of a concern and they had more armor.
yes,
But from what I saw, these two, the Ise class, started off as the Fuso class, did it not? And when
yeah,
they
they did.
built the first two, well, like you said, in the beginning they only had money to build just one of them, although I've forgotten the name of which one. Fuso probably. And then they started the construction on the second sister ship, but after that they sort of realized that the Fuso class design was not optimal, to,
It
to put it
was
politely.
lightly put. It was far from optimal. Like you had your turrets in the front, then your engine and superstructure, another turret, engine and funnel, and then another turret, and then engine and superstructure, and then you had the last two turrets,
Yeah,
which
so a
which
lot
also
of
made her armor scheme very complex, unnecessary complex even, and also spread out her uh vulnerabilities. So all you needed was to just hit a broadside of her, and you most likely hit her something very important.
but like they on the Fuso, so they had a turret, then an engine, and then a turret in the middle. That must be such a complicated and awkward thing to have, having a turret in between your whole engines and a smoke funnel as well. That must have been interesting. But there we are with the Ise class. So these two were originally part of the Fuso class, but then they redesigned it, and well, this was born. And
Mm.
the two ships of this class, we got Ise and Hyuga, and I do believe those are the two ships on the photos right in the front, right? I believe the bottom
Uh,
one is Ise and the top is Hyuga.
no, the bottom one is as when they were completed. That is easy.
Oh yeah,
And they on the top is also Ise, but that's during her later refits in the 1920s
yeah. So I
when she
guess
was
I
when
guess
she got
we'll.
started to begin to take a look on the iconic Japanese pagoda tower.
Oh yeah, I absolutely love those towers, though. I'll be honest. But I guess some quick little stats. They're armed with a total of 6 twin 356mm guns, set up in a two, so two in the front, two in the middle, two in the back. Then we've got 20 single 14cm guns, which is another difference from the Fuso actually, because the Fuso had 152mm guns.
Yeah, the main reason they went for the 14 centimeters or 5.5 inch guns was because they noticed that the bigger guns actually was harder to reload and actually took longer and were even more clumsier. So they came up with the 14 centimeters because they were way cheaper and easier to reload and make.
Yeah. And then for AA, we've got a magnificent 4 7.62mm machine guns. Or 6, I've seen it differ from sources, but 4 or 6 machine guns is not really much to talk about, really.
No, not much. And you also got to remember that this was also during a time where like planes were not seen as that big as a threat, so they
Yeah.
didn't need that much.
They were more for small boats, I guess, that were stocking up on them.
Yeah.
But to finish it off, it also has 6 underwater torpedo tubes, with 3 being on either side.
Yeah.
But these were very
Because
quickly scrapped.
very quickly scrapped, and also mainly because every battleship at that time had torpedo tubes.
Yeah, definitely. Right, so here we've got the interwar refit, and like you said, one of the biggest differences here was the tower, being more the iconic. What was it again? I keep forgetting the name.
The Pagoda Tower.
That's the one.
Yes, and this is a picture of Hyuga in 1927, before she got her 1930s refit.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll get to that very interesting refit in a bit. But I guess the biggest change here is, well, of course, the tower, but also anti-aircraft weaponry. It finally actually has some of them. So what I can see, or what I've read here, is that they actually got rid of 4 of the 14 centimeter guns, probably to make room somewhere for some additional stuff. But the biggest difference would be the 4 twin 127mm AA guns, and also the 10 twin 25mm guns. Even though they're not that effective, it's at least something.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny that what I know about these ships is this refit. It was constructed, and it was all blech. I've completely lost what I'm going to say. I'm going to cut this out. Don't worry.
Yeah. A thing you need to remember is that from the 1930s, when they started getting their refits, they actually they installed better propulsion systems by taking out their 24 water tube boilers and replacing them with 8 more powerful water tube boilers, which actually made more room. So they, in their infinite wisdom, put the engines in the smack bang in the middle of the ship. And that actually increased their top speed from 23 knots. Or that's what was their design top speed. The Hyuga was actually able to reach a top speed of 24 knots thanks to having more power than expected, and also because she was just lucky with her whole construction. As ships tend to get designed for speed, and either they reach that speed or they actually go above it.
Also, for the people that don't really know, 24 knots is about 45 kilometers an hour, or 27 miles an hour. Sorry about that. It's a normal speed for the battleships of those days, to be honest.
Yeah, at those days, that was actually seen on the slightly quicker side.
It's not Congo type of speeds, but it's definitely good.
The Congos are just speed.
Speed demons, but not a lot of armor. I guess the next one we'll go into is the carrier refit, or just the World War II refit.
Yeah. The interesting refit.
Very interesting. So here, I think we all know that the Japanese carrier force was absolutely smashed by the US.
Yeah. It was also smashed quite early on, which is also what prompted this refit actually quite early.
So Japan was looking for new options, and they of course had these 2 Ise-class battleships, and these 2 were seen as obsolete by World War II standards at this point, even with the more recent refit that we just talked about. So here they thought, let's turn the battleships into a hybrid carrier. You can see on the rear there, we've got a plane standing on an aircraft deck, and we're actually missing the 2 primary turrets on the rear.
Yeah. They mainly did this because they, as mentioned earlier, they actually lost their aircraft carrier, so they needed a replacement quickly. And while they're not 100% carriers, they made up for that being float plane carriers, so they can hold a grand total of 22 aircrafts.
Yeah, and of course it also has 2 catapults for launching the plane. So
one on each side, which you kind of need if you want to have like.
Yeah, you kind of need that. Yeah. But like you said, 22 aircraft each. And in the planned cases, 11 of those were going to be D-4Y dive bombers, and the other 11 were going to be E-16A reconnaissance aircraft. But in reality, they only carried 4 planes at best. The aircraft crews that were planned for these ships, they were absolutely not trained. There were also not enough pilots. And in the end, well, the ships were not really used. Well, like the refit here, they weren't even really used for that purpose, sadly.
Yeah, sadly, like they could have like been like a niche reconnaissance ship and support ship, but as they lacked any planes and pilots, they kind of never got used in the role. They were used as transport ships and cargo ships from time to time, but other than that, they just sat around doing nothing.
Yeah.
Except for that one time where the Americans were confused as to why is there a battleship with carrier deck when they were used as a decoy to drag away the American forces from one of their invasions.
Yeah, I guess the Americans would have probably raised a lot of question marks seeing a ship like this float around.
What is this? Is this a how are the Japanese so high tech?
But also something very nice about this refit is you got a lot of anti-aircraft weaponry.
Oh yeah, they because Japan noticed that America really loved the planes. They're like, you know what? I don't like planes, so they started putting the not that good 25 centimeters, no, not centimeters, 2 millimeters anti-air weapons everywhere.
Yeah, I can see here 31 triples and 11 singles, 25mm AA guns, and then
Yeah.
also 8 twin 127mm guns. That is very, very powerful. And on top of that, 6 30-round AA rocket launchers. Now, I don't know the details about these, but they sound interesting.
Yeah, they are actually quite interesting. I'm gonna try to see if I can find information about that, but the concept was essentially they just launched those rockets at the planes, and
Yeah, probably set up with a time fuse or something along those lines to go off. Or they would just be at a fixed distance, and if they ever got close, they would just fire the rockets away.
yeah, that could also be it. I mean, it sure is one way to make sure that yeah, we don't want you here, so keep out.
Exactly.
It's just a shame that they didn't have any of the good anti-air. They only had the 25 millimeters.
Yeah, well, they didn't really have anything else at that time, sadly.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right, so now we're at the sad part of the video because all
Yes.
good things come to an end, sadly.
Yeah,
So
but yeah, you go on.
in the end, both the ships, because the aircraft crews were not really a thing and the whole carrier part of the ships just didn't quite work, they were turned into floating AA batteries. Which is kind of sad for what they were originally planned for, but hey, you know, it is what it is. And pretty much the US got wind of this and they found out where the ships were and they sent out pretty much their entire air force, if I'm correct, trying to sink both of these.
And mostly also because also most ships that were also anchored near them, or in the general bay that it was.
Yeah. Well, like, that's sort of the problem. Both of them were kept at the same bay, if I'm correct. Together with a whole bunch of other ships.
A whole bunch of other ships. They were, I believe, the main reason they were anchored there was because they were to be used as a final defense fleet. I could be wrong on this.
Yeah, well, this is late war we're talking about, like 1945. So this is probably what has happened here. So to pretty much sum it up quickly, Hyuga basically received 10 direct hits and up to 30 near misses. So she was pretty much going down right away. A lot of, like, around 200 crew members were killed and 600 wounded.
Yeah,
it was not exactly a nice time.
A part of her stern was actually just blown straight off the ship, and her bridge was just straight up destroyed. So, or that's on the Hyuga at least. The
Ise didn't do that much better.
I mean, both of them were kind of like in a not that good situation during that air attack. I mean, most ships that was anchored in that bay during the attack was also not doing good.
Yeah.
They were straight up not having a good time.
Ise pretty much received 11 or more direct hits and even more near misses. Pretty much the same as Hyuga. But what I do like, which you can see on the photo, they were anchored in a bay and it was rather shallow. So even though they were sinking, they didn't really go all the way underwater. They just sort of sat there.
Just sat there and like, hey yo, we exist. We are kind of above water, but we're not floating.
Which is honestly a bad thing because that basically means they were very easy to be scrapped. And they are no longer with us, not even at the bottom of the ocean, sadly.
Sadly. That was truly a sad time.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to round it off here. That was the Ise-class battlecruisers. A very interesting class of ship, if you ask me.
Yeah, they were quite interesting. Had a interesting history in that they did literally nothing. They were seen as obsolete, and suddenly they were turned into a carrier, which even then they did very little other than being literally known for that they had a carrier deck on the back of the ship.
They honestly had a bit of a sad history. You know, they were improved Fusos, yet the Fusos were used more, and they were considered obsolete, the Ises. And then they were going to be turned into aircraft carriers, and even that didn't work. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, I mean, unlike the Fusos, they didn't blow up.
That is true.
I mean, that also has something to do with the Fuso also being like very badly built, or not built, but the design layout is just like, what is this? There are so many things that could go wrong here, and I guarantee you something will go wrong.
Right, anyways, that's where we're going to leave it for today. Hope you all have a nice day or evening, wherever you are, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.
See ya. Goodbye.